Lorna King is a workplace culture consultant. She's here in the studio. The big question really is, why do managers have such a big impact on our mental well-being, sometimes even more than our own families?
There's multiple factors to it. Like you say, just the amount of time you spend with them is one of those things, but there's also a power dynamic at play here. These people often have your fate in your hands, so you can't always fully be yourself, assert yourself in the same way as you can. It's not a fair fight in many ways. So if someone is abusing that power, the effect of that is disproportionate on the person and can have a huge impact.
And I mean, we work in an environment here in this country where a lot of people are working long hours. Where does that fit into this in terms of the picture of how many hours we're spending? Are we spending less time with our families here, more time with our bosses? Is the impact kind of magnified here, do you think?
It's a whole ecosystem when you think about it, isn't it? When you think about well-being, it factors in so many different things. You have people with a predisposition to mental illness. You have the sleep, you have the situational factors, people have personal lives. So yeah, the more time you spend at the work, the less time you can invest on filling up your other cups is going to make you more susceptible to having mental illness. And if you throw in a bad boss on top of that, you've got no chance.
And Lorna, before we go on, maybe a difficult question for you, but what do you think are the most critical qualities that make a leader good for our well-being?
I think there's many different tests, psychometric tests, 360s, all of those things. There's many different models, and there's different measures you can do that by, but essentially it's the relationships with each person. A lot of people can have a great relationship with one boss, but then if they can't make it work with another person, then that can be a very difficult situation, especially because then it's very isolating. You're feeling like, why am I the only one who doesn't think this person's great? And the other thing to think about as well is not just your managers, because that level, actually, when you look at a lot of engagement survey results, they're often the most squeezed and struggling the most because they have pressures from the top and bottom. Culture Amp were here recently, and we're talking about actually how senior leadership often influences someone's engagement and well-being in an organization as much as their manager, if not more so. They're setting the direction, they're also setting the culture, and if they're pushing pressure down onto the managers, then that trickles down throughout the whole organisation. So we really need to look at that top layer as well and making sure that we're looking after them and that they're looking after their people, so then it can roll out across a whole organisation.
So even, I guess, those bosses that maybe you don't have any face time with, that wouldn't recognise you if they passed you in the hall, but are essentially setting the direction for the whole office or environment then?
100%. It's massively underestimated what a CEO is. Culture is not CHRO's, CEO's responsibility solely. It's everybody's job, but they're definitely role modelling, and what they do matters. And I really want them to take this message home. If they're listening, what you do matters. People are watching. Do right by them.
Lorna, do you agree? Do you think that there are perhaps patterns in terms of when that relationship breaks down? Are there ever bad employees, or is it just a bad fit?
I would like to believe in people. Realistically, there will be times where someone has bad intentions, but at this point, it's normally part of the system. And this is where the culture piece is so important, because you can be very clear about your culture. And let's be clear about this. Culture is not fluffy. Culture is just having clarity about what you value, whether that's hard work, high performance, whatever words it is you want to use. And then you tell people, this is what we stand for. Are you in or are you out? So embedding that in every part, from the talent attraction, selection process, through to the performance management and employee lifecycle, so people are being rewarded for showing the right behaviours. This all comes from the system. So the leadership and the clarity. I feel like we're saying the same things here, but you can't state it enough. It's a systemic problem or opportunity. Let's put it that way. There's a huge opportunity here for organisations to be intentional and create these systems and look at the employee life cycle end to end and make sure everything is aligned with their business strategy and everybody's talking the same language and getting them pulling in the same direction.
So when you go into an organisation and you're looking at the culture piece and trying to find a way to improve a company's culture, where do you start, and what are the kind of, I guess, the most common sticking points or obstacles to creating that culture that promotes well-being and satisfaction at work at all levels?
The first thing is to listen and really pay attention. So look at the data, look at the HR data, attrition rates, exit interviews. and then actually conduct them yourself. So surveys, culture surveys, look at the engagement, actually speak to people as well, because that's where the real nuance comes, and things can be different. You know, you can have the same organisation, different lived experience in different departments by gender, by nationality. So taking that data and informing where you look next and dig deeper, and then customising the plan, because well-being means such different things for everyone. You know, I've been in organisations where men and women have both voted for well-being, and when we've spoken to them, for men it was about, let's have a gym on site, and for the women it was like, we need a bit of flexibility, the commute's killing us and we want to be home, you know, like an hour more a day. That would make all the difference to us. So not making any assumptions is the first step. Listening.
Welcome back. We are talking bad bosses, good bosses today, because research shows that our managers have as significant an impact on our well-being as our spouses do, and potentially even more of an impact than our GPs or doctors. And today, an average of 40% of workers globally say they are often or always stressed about work. So clearly, not all of our leaders are getting it right. Do you think that there's an element of a sort of identity thing as well with people when they get to that management level of trying to figure out what sort of boss they want to be, and maybe struggling to find their identity as they move up the ranks?
Especially, I'm going to bring the gender thing into this as well, because if you'll remember the Sheryl Sandberg thing about lean in, there was this very traditional sort of masculine view of what a leader should be, and that's assertive and strong and loud and never doubt themselves, and, you know, all of these things. And I think hopefully as a society we're coming to recognise that leadership means such a broad sense of things, and people will follow people who are authentic to themselves. And that can be soft, and it can be hard, and it can be variable depending on the circumstances, because no one is the same in every scenario. The trust thing is what you said before. If you can maintain the trust and that team know that you've got their best interests at heart, when you have to be hard on them, when you lose your temper, they know that it's for a reason and that you'll recover from it. And it builds a resilience of teams as well.
It's like that parental thing, isn't it? I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. Like, you don't want to disappoint a boss that you really respect. I think what's really interesting here is this idea of it tying to mental health, that perhaps there are some companies or bosses, as you said, Lorna, who would see that as fluffy. What's the bottom line impact of a satisfied, healthy, engaged workforce? Because presumably it must be good for business if people like turning up to work.
Absolutely. You know, just look up any sort of Gallup statistic or any sort of credible body. You'll see so much evidence for this. Obviously, it's such a complex thing. We've talked about the systems. Paul's mentioned this a lot, which makes it a bit hard to measure. If I do this, then that. So you have to trust the correlation. But there is so much evidence to support that good well-being, good culture, alignment, good leadership leads to good financial rewards. And therefore, I think leaders really need to be held accountable at a KPI level. And we've helped companies build, culture in as a KPI, and helped the leaders be responsible. Because if you were working with a doctor, you wouldn't want to just think, oh, well, these people have been trained once and now they're sort of free to do surgery or whatever for the rest of their life. They do continuous medical education, and it should be the same for leaders. If you're responsible for someone's livelihood, life, and, you know, influencing their well-being, then that's something that you should be trained to handle. And as a basic minimum, you know, the mental health first aider, it's super basic. It's stopping people from crisis points, but that's the bare minimum we can offer. So if you want to start somewhere today, then I think all people with people manager skills could do something like that. It takes two days, and, you know, it's something.
And what does a KPI for well-being look like? Because as you mentioned earlier, one of the challenges is getting people to not see this as a sort of woolly, hard to pin down thing. How do you set a KPI? What does that look like in practice?
So I've done it for culture scores, looking at the culture, which is the overall system, and how people are working and how aligned they are. And that incorporates things like potentially limiting values, where you might find things like bureaucracy or the command and control values that Paul was talking about earlier. But then there's a range of things. You can look at engagement. You can look at, you have positive attrition, and then you have less positive attrition. So I would pull together a number of metrics to make sure you're getting the full picture, because you might see little hotspots in certain places. And like I say, the overall score might be good, but you'll often see, for example, managers are suffering the most. So it's really important to pay attention to different points of data and not just look to one.
From the organisations you've worked in, what's the thing that you can switch that would really start making an immediate difference?
In addition to asking people what they want or looking at the data, addressing it. So this is what we've heard. We're going to do something about it, or we're not going to do something about it. It's not saying that you have to do everything your employees ask of you, but it's being really clear and making sure that you're not leading people on with false expectations. So giving people that gift of clarity. And on a grassroots level, I mean, at all levels, because that's what you sort of asked, I think recognition is a key lever that not enough people push on. And that is something that can be really democratic. It's something that you can do, as on the forecourt of a garage, anywhere. You are, as an individual, able to make a massive impact on someone else's day by saying a sincere thank you, a specific thank you, and giving someone a shout out. And that goes from the top to the bottom. That's everybody's superpower.
Lorna King there and Paul Littlejohn. We're all out of time, but if you would like either of their information, send me the word work. I will send you their details.